Denver Gazette is counting down the top sports stories of 2023, and we have reached the top. We have reached number one. And I think anybody who's been listening or watching these knows what number one is. It is the Denver Nuggets winning their first NBA title. So I'm joined by Vinny Benedetto to break it all down. Vinny, does it seems like it wasn't that long ago, and now they're already in the next season.
Yeah, that was obviously my first time covering a team that wins a championship. So it went real fast from Game 5 of the NBA Finals to covering the parade, and then turning around and being ready for the draft, free agency, and summer league. So yeah, it felt like I got like a month, and the team had a month to unwind, and then it was time to get ready again for training camp.
So, it was the Nuggets were near the top of the Western Conference all season, starting, in November of 22. These seasons overlap, so sometimes it's a little weird. They were the number one seed going into the playoffs. They never seemed like the favorites, and we talked about that plenty during the playoff run. But how much do you think that how much motivation did that give the Nuggets? We know it gave Michael Malone a lot of motivation.
Oh, the fact that they were number one in the West from like Christmas on, and then still didn't have the
right.
I think it was certainly motivating. I remember once during the playoff run, I think it was after they beat Phoenix and they were getting ready for the Western Conference Finals, Michael Malone shouted out a national reporter who was one of the few people to pick them to beat the Suns in a press conference. So it was certainly a motivating factor for Michael Malone. And I think it was a pretty big motivating factor in general. And then you look at, I think other guys use the MVP race as some sort of motivation. I don't know how much that got to Nikola Jokic, but I feel like other guys wanted to perform well for Joker after, they probably felt like he lost an award, or, came in second for an award that he probably should have won. So yeah, I think there was no shortage of motivation throughout last season's playoff run.
So this was a season that had a lot of expectations, and this is one of the few seasons where they met all those expectations. They took home the trophy at the end. But I remember you and I talking at the beginning of the year. Jamal Murray's big, Michael Porter Jr.'s big. Bruce Brown is a big free agent signing. Like, there was a lot on this team, and they just they never seemed to let pressure bother them the whole season and then the whole playoff run.
Yeah, I think that might be, one of the most impressive things about it, because going into last season, it was like you had 2 years of deferred expectation and anticipation all rolled into, last season. So you had like almost, 2.5 years of people waiting to see what this team, looked like when healthy, because we got like 8 games of after the Aaron Gordon trade where that starting lineup was together before the injury started to happen. So yeah, they were I would say from about this time last year on, they were pretty dialed in outside of that stretch late in the regular season where they all but had the 1 seed locked up, and you could tell guys were starting to get themselves ready for the playoffs. So yeah, it was really, I think, a pretty comprehensive and impressive showing, both physically and mentally from that team last year.
Well, and it's funny you mentioned that stretch, because I remember they smacked Memphis at home, which pretty much kind of sealed it. That was when Jamal Murray was getting in the Brooks, and it was all that, and then they went, what'd they go, 500 down the stretch? It was not great, I remember.
That feels right. And that was like losing to San Antonio.
Yeah.
And I think they pulled out a game against Detroit like they did earlier this season, where Detroit wasn't trying to do anything, and it took all the Nuggets had to not lose to the Pistons. So,
and there was a lot of talk that, are they going to be ready for the playoffs? So they opened with Minnesota, and then that game 1, they just smacked Minnesota really good. I mean, in that series, but that series was probably the close. Then that the Lakers series was pretty close too, but that series was tough on the Nuggets, that first round series.
Yeah, and I mean, I think you kind of, what we're seeing from the Timberwolves this year, obviously they've been healthier this regular season than they were in that playoff series last year, but you could kind of see, glimpses of what that Timberwolves team could become, and they've taken that step this year. Yeah, so that was really, I think, a pretty strong test to open the playoffs, but for the Nuggets to handle that in 5 games.
Yeah, they lost that one game in overtime.
Yeah, I think that was a pretty good indicator that we always talk about flipping the switch in terms of behavior and developing championship habits, but I think late last regular season, we can feel pretty good that the Nuggets found the switch when we're able to go from preparing themselves for the playoffs and then flipping the switch and being in playoff mode.
And so the next round they get Phoenix, and you talked about that thing after they beat Phoenix where Coach Malone called out the reporter and everything. That series, Nuggets win pretty big in game one. I remember Jamal Murray hyping the crowd up about, I think we're built for this or whatever he was saying. Game two was that really slug, like 87 game, whatever. But then they go to Phoenix and Durant and Booker just go nuclear. It's 2-2. And then I think that game five was probably one of the biggest Nuggets games in history when they came back to Denver. And they smacked Phoenix in game five. They went to Phoenix and smacked them in game six. Jokic in that series and Nikola Jokic's greatness through this whole thing is like nothing we ever saw.
Yeah, it was pretty unreal. And those last two games of that Phoenix series,
yeah,
I think were the most impressive. You mentioned the game five win here, and then to go to Phoenix a couple days later, and they just blitzed that team right out of the gate. And that was like, at that point, I was like, okay, these guys might actually win it all. But yeah, Joker was just at a different level, really all throughout the playoffs. And I think if you look at, some of the moves that Phoenix made this offseason, especially one involving the Trailblazers, I think a lot of that had to deal with, finding somebody who's at least up for the physical challenge of going up against Joker for 5 or 6 games.
So then, of course, they go to the Western Conference Finals, and of course they have to play the Lakers. As any Nuggets fan like myself would know, of course it had to be the Lakers. There was no other way. This wouldn't have been right if they would have. I mean, I guess they could have played Golden State in that round, but it just felt right. They sweep them, the closest sweep in the history of time, according to some, we remember. But that series, again, Nikola Jokic is great. Jamal Murray is great. That was the series where I was really like, this two-man game is unstoppable for them.
Yeah, that was just insane. Looking back on, some of those shots Nikola Jokic was making in LA, it was just like, I feel
it
like
was also against Anthony Davis, who people were like, oh, he's going to shut him down.
Yeah. And I think, some people having been to crypto.com arena, if that's what we're still calling it, some of the Lakers fans or even some of the national media who haven't seen a ton of Joker felt like some of those shots were like lucky. But you watch him enough, those are shots you see him take regularly and make regularly. But yeah, that Western Conference Finals really felt like that was like the peak of the two-man game, because Phoenix, it felt like it was a lot of getting stops, getting out and running. I remember KCP, I think, and maybe even Aaron Gordon having some big games against Phoenix, but against the Lakers, they're able to slow it down a bit more. And it feels like that two-man game really kind of reached its peak in that Western Conference Finals.
So they go to their first finals. In game 4, they stop LeBron on the final play in LA to sweep, which was amazing. The finals, they win game 1. They lose game 2 to a very, very feisty Miami team, and people are like, whoa, what, are they in trouble? They go to Miami and just smack them. Jokic and Murray have 30-point triple doubles. Was that game 4 or 3?
I want to say that was 3.
Yeah. And so they have a chance to clinch back at Ball Arena. Game 5 is not pretty. But the Nuggets win, and they win their first title in 47 years. It was a really magical moment. And as you were in that arena, like, I'm sure you felt it.
Yeah, and it was weird because, after game 2, I remember there being legit concern from Nuggets fans, about, did we just lost home court advantage? Are we going to blow it? But then looking back, it was like, that was a game the Nuggets didn't seem to take very seriously, which is weird. Or, I mean, they just didn't play with the right level of, intensity.
Well, Malone went after them after that game, right?
Yeah. It was a soft performance for considering the situation. But then they went to Miami 3-4. They were clearly the better team. And then coming back for game 5, just being in the building, you could just, everybody there felt like tonight's the night something special is going to happen. And to your point, it was pretty gross for a while. You know, they couldn't. I remember the Nuggets couldn't hit a jumper, and then I think Michael Porter Jr., who couldn't buy a bucket all of the NBA Finals, hits their first three, I think, late in the third quarter to either tie or put the Nuggets ahead, and it felt like that was the shot that kind of like opened the levees, and you know they were able to get it done, and then the celebration started.
Was that also the game where he had like the between the legs? Michael Porter Jr. had the between the legs, where
Like
I
from
just remember,
behind and then
yeah, and
flip the layup in.
yeah, and you know, and I just remember watching that game here with my kids and my family. Before I had to dive into the professional part after the game,
Right.
but you know, Jimmy Butler just takes over that stretch in the fourth quarter, and there's that bad call on the three
Mm-hmm.
where he kicked Aaron Gordon. Do you remember this in the corner? But
Yep.
and Malone challenged it, and they still stuck and gave him 3 free throws. And I
Mm-hmm.
remember saying to my kids, like, "Oh no, this is where it's going to go downhill." And then I thought, no, this team is just different.
Mm-hmm.
This team those things didn't affect them, and they all, you know, and even the game-winning shot was a putback by Bruce Brown, technically. So, you know, I know you're not from here, I am, but you know, this, what do you think this title ranks for a lot of people? It's very high.
Yeah, I would say so. I don't know where it compares to, you know, those Broncos Super Bowls in the, you know, late 90s have to be up there. And, you know, I don't know where the Avs Nuggets, you know, how that kind of, you know, obviously the Nuggets have a longer history here in Denver. But I also covered some of that Avs
Yeah.
Stanley Cup run a couple of years ago. And to me, you know, I'm not a huge hockey person, but that felt different in terms of like, you know, Avs fans have been here before. They know what this go, you know, how this goes, what this feels like. Um, Covering that Nuggets run, it was just, you know, this is something new, and this is, you know, kind of to your point, you know, Nuggets fans have been tortured for, you know, decades, and especially when it comes to, you know, meeting the Lakers in the playoffs, or you know, just having things not go your way in terms of, you know, injury luck late in the regular season that impacts the playoff run in recent years. So yeah, it just felt like this was something that people had really waited for, and had kind of been teased whether it was ever going to happen or not. You think back to, you know, they had great teams in the 80s that just couldn't get past the Lakers. Think about some of those Carmelo teams
The
who were,
'09 team is the one that always comes up.
that was, you know, a shot away from,
Yeah.
you know, feeling like they had a chance. But yeah, this team was just, I think the lasting memory is going to be just how well everyone complemented each other, like skill sets. You know, the starting five, I think, still fits together almost perfectly, and then you've got, you know, different guys able to do different things off the bench, and you know, there just wasn't a lot of ego on that team either. And
Yeah.
you think about some of these contending teams that have multiple stars, and it just feels like it's always a delicate balance of who's the guy. And you know, with this team, it was Nikola Jokic's night a lot of nights. It was Jamal Murray's night a lot of nights. But you know, you look back at that run, and I don't think they get there without some of those big games. You know, KCP had big playoff games. Aaron Gordon stepped up. Bruce Brown had massive games. Christian Brown had like 19 points in a finals game.
Yep.
So I think, you know, you look at least, you know, 1 through 8 or 9, and every one of those guys feels like they could, you know, they stepped up and really contributed to the Nuggets' first championship.
And I think their team aspect was really refreshing to watch, like you said, because I remember in game one of the finals where the Heat were switching or something, and Aaron Gordon kept getting Gabe Vincent on him.
Yep.
And they would just throw Aaron Gordon the ball. He would just
Yep.
dunk or get a layup or get fouled. And that just didn't bother this team. You're right. And this felt, as a fan, I'm going to talk as a fan right now, this was like 3 years in the making,
Mm-hmm.
because I still remember the night that Jamal Murray tore his ACL against Golden State. There was an audible gasp from me at like 10:45 at night. I'm surprised I didn't wake up my whole house, because I was like, oh no, this team had a chance,
Yep.
and it's over, and it's probably over for 2 years, and it was over for 2 years.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, I think the ego thing is interesting because they have the most egoless superstar ever, probably.
Yeah, and like you're not gonna find just the nature of the game. All of these guys have been the best player in their hometown, the best player in high school, best player on their college team.
And Michael Porter Jr. was what, the top recruited player in the country when he?
Yeah. And like, Aaron Gordon was probably, he was the best guy in Orlando before he comes here and has to slot into the third or fourth option offensively. But like in these NBA locker rooms, having a lack of ego is really pretty remarkable.
Yeah.
And this team figured it out. And I think it starts with Nikola, obviously, where he doesn't let any of the award debates, any of that individual accomplishment stuff get to him. I think it's hard for any of the other guys to say, oh, I need to make this about me. So I think it starts with him. I think, coaching, front office, also plays a part in the culture they develop. But I think it's a lot easier to have that kind of culture when you've got a center who's just as likely to dish out 15 assists as he is to score 30 or 40 points. So I think that selflessness of the entire group, was really, really important during that championship run.
And I know this was actually in the summer of 22, but the trade for KCP, they don't win the title without that trade.
No. Yeah. I mean, that was kind of like I said earlier, the starting five it just fits together perfectly. And, and to the egoless part, like KCP was a lottery pick who was kind of drafted to come in and be a scorer for the Pistons. And over his NBA career, he developed into the 3-and-D guy, which, to me doesn't seem like the most like exciting role to, hey, go guard the opposing team's best guard and stretch the court. And you might only get 5 shots tonight, but we're going to need you to be a 40% 3-point shooter, even, if the shots don't come regularly. So he was a perfect fit. And I think, he had a taste of championship success with the Lakers in the bubble. And then he got shipped off to Washington, which was probably a tough situation there for a couple of years. So I think the Nuggets and KCP both needed each other, and it was really, really pretty remarkable trade.
And, when we talk about Jokic, he made the comment about the parade after the game and all that stuff. But no, then you saw the videos, and you were in the locker room. There's a video of him like throwing Jamal Murray in the pool, and then there's him dropping F-bombs at the parade, and it was just so refreshing. I don't know, like it's really hard to explain the parade. You were there. Malone is just hammered and loving it, and I just feel like it was just such a perfect, like I said, like it was like a cap on 3 seasons almost. Like it was just a perfect ending for them. And I don't want to say ending because, it's not over. Like they're, I'm going to ask you about upcoming, but yeah, I mean, it just kind of capped everything but it's going to continue. Like it's an ending, but not really, I guess.
Yeah. But I think one thing that, I don't know if we've mentioned yet, or that might be a little bit overlooked, is how much pressure there was on these guys going into last season, because you had the 2 seasons before where you're going into the playoffs with, you're just really shorthanded in the playoffs. And, I don't think anybody was really around here was expecting too much, the last couple of seasons to win a playoff series with Facu and Austin Rivers being your starting backcourt was,
oh man,
but that was like fun. And it was like, okay, they did it, and
they beat Portland somehow in a playoff series when they had Dame and CJ McCollum. I don't even know how they did that.
But last year at this time, I don't remember if we had how many conversations about it, but last year at this time, it was kind of like this year where they're still figuring out the bench.
Yep.
But I remember having conversations about Michael Malone's job security. What does this team need to do to make sure that he's back next year? And it's just like, you look at the relationship Malone and Nikola Jokic have, I'm sure, Nikola didn't want there to be a coaching change. So, maybe it's more important to him that they get it done, that year and make sure that coach isn't going anywhere. But yeah, there was this kind of, obviously my first time covering an NBA championship, but it felt like it was almost as much relief as it was like elation.
A little bit, yeah.
But there was a whole lot of elation too. So,
everybody had fun. That's for sure.
It was quite a moment, quite a week for those guys, and yeah, a well-deserved celebration.
So then they go into the offseason. They lose Bruce Brown. They lose Jeff Green, 2 very key parts of the title run. As we're recording this, they are 15-9, I believe. They're hovering right around the top of the Western Conference, just like they were
Mhm.
last year. You know, we Michael Malone has no problem talking dynasty. But I think they're the favorites. I don't know what else to say. I think they are.
Yep. I mean, and
It
I
goes
think,
through Denver. I mean, everything goes through Denver.
yep. And I think having won the championship gives you some, it doesn't devalue the regular season, but it really emphasizes the most important thing is being in a, feeling good and being able to play your best ball in, leading up into the playoffs and making sure you're kind of peaking at the right time. I think that it becomes of even heightened importance now that you've understand the grind and the physical toll it takes to, play the 20 games it took to get to that championship. So, I think if you would have asked me prior to the season, 24 games in, 15-9 sound right? I would have said, yeah, that sounds about right for a team who had a short off season and, has the confidence that, there were funks last year where they lost a couple games where people were freaking out or,
Yeah.
it felt like, the bench wasn't ever going to get figured out. And then they played Bruce Brown as backup point guard and it all kind of slots into place. So yeah.
Yeah, I didn't mention they went 16-4 in that playoff run. And how many road? They have 6 road wins, and that's I think 2 in Miami, 2 in LA, one in Phoenix, one in Minnesota. So that's 6.
Yeah.
So I mean, I don't know if they'll get the top seed this year. Who knows? But everything runs through Denver in the NBA right now, and that's pretty cool to say. That's for sure. All right, Vinny, thanks for coming on and doing this. If you want to see any other of these top stories, please go to denvergazette.com and check them all out. And Vinny, we will catch up more during the season. Thanks for coming on.
Absolutely. Thank you.